Hello and welcome to our webinar, Conscious Grant Writing Advice on Harnessing Your Passion for Grant Writing While Avoiding Burnout. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Tammy Tilsey, and I'm the director of the Grant Hub team here at Foundant Technologies, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. If this is the first Grant Hub sponsored educational webinar you've attended, thank you for joining us. We do these educational webinars each month where we bring on a special guest like Yana and to give us an educational presentation. It's one of my favorite things that we do here at Foundant to further our work in maximizing the philanthropic community. As part of that focus, we also have software solutions that help simplify and improve the granting process. So today, I'm going to touch on who is Foundant, what we do, and turn the time right over to Yana to jump into the main educational portion. Foundant is focused on making the grant process easier. You may have heard of our solution for grant makers, which a lot of funders use. So you might have applied for a grant using our software. We also have a software solution called Grant Hub that helps grant seekers organize, plan, submit, and streamline their grant process. So Grant Hub is the team that's sponsoring this educational webinar along with Yana. So if you're ever in the need to up your grant management or organize your grants, look us up, but that's all the talking I'm going to do about that right now. So let me introduce Yana Hexter. She's the owner of Grants Champion, and she leads a grant development and training business where she has written well over 150 successful proposals and raised over $60 million for her clients. She has spoken at the Grant Professionals Association's conference, as well as the Association of Fundraising Professional National Conference. She lives in Ithaca, New York with her children, Black Lab, and a plethora of wonderful friends. That's nice. And a fun fact about Yana, she has a 40-foot labyrinth in her garden installed by the president of the World Labyrinth Society, which happens to be located in her hometown. So it's with great pleasure that I now turn the time over to Yana to talk to us about harnessing our passions for grant writing while avoiding burnout. So Yana, I'm passing control over to you and making you presenter. I could see your screen well.
All right, wonderful. So we will jump in. And yes, just to put it in perspective, I live in a tiny village of 2,000 people in upstate New York, and the World Labyrinth Society is headquartered here. So that's quite an accolade, I think. So wonderful. Well, I'm really grateful for everyone taking the time. I know that we're all busy, especially this time of year. And I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this. And my intention is that at the end of the session, that you're left with a deeper sense of peace and carefreeness around grant writing, and that you have some tools in your belt that you can pull out and use so that you're more successful, and more than that, that you just have a better life while you're doing it, because I know it can be stressful. So as we dive in, I just want to share with you a little bit about the picture that's here on this very first screen. And that is from this summer, my daughter and I, we walked across the Camino de Santiago, which goes from the Pyrenees in France all the way across Spain, pretty much to the coast. And it's 500 miles. And this was a picture that I took one dawn. We climbed up to an old Celtic ruins of a hill town that was abandoned 5,000 years ago. Had the most incredible views, and this is from that picture. So it's a beautiful, sacred place, and wanted to start my presentation with that. So first, I'm going to start with just why is grant writing so stressful? I've been doing this for over 20 years, and I totally come in face to face with burnout myself. And I realized that grant writing is just stressful inherently because we deal with two of the biggest pressures in our society, time and money. And in grant writing, they come together in a really powerful way. We're dealing with hard deadlines, time crunches that are not movable, and money, an often significant amount of money that if you fail to win it, You might have to lay off members of your team, or a program may have to cut down, or your entire organization may not continue. So it's really high stakes. It can be for some people. We're also dealing with win-lose competition. It doesn't matter if you almost win a grant. If you get 97.5 and the cutoff is 98, it really doesn't matter. They don't give you a little bit of money for doing really well. So it's, we're dealing with win-lose. And you're having your work scored and graded, and it can bring up stuff for all of us around being graded and scored in high school and in college, and it's uncomfortable for all of us. The other is that we're facing possible rejection and defeat, and I think this is one of the reasons why some people put off grant writing. Because if you don't put it in, you can't get rejected. And so it's, when you put it in, there's something at stake. You may get back bad reviews, you may lose, your peers may see you for not having won. So it can be challenging for some people. And for a lot of people, it's done on top of full-time jobs, and you're writing in your spare time as if you have any. And for a lot of people that I've worked with over the years, they're fully trained as child psychologists or as addiction specialists or educators. And yet they're doing grant writing. It's something they've probably never been trained in, but it's become part of their job, and usually an onerous part of their job. And so that really just does add the stress. And it's often not the core skill set. For someone who's a fantastic preschool teacher, or has a knack of working with kids with autism, writing grant proposals may just be totally out of your realm as far as things that come naturally and easily. So that makes it stressful. For me, I don't enjoy doing budgets. I do them because they need to be done, but I notice that I feel less energized when I've been working with hardcore numbers for a few hours versus working with words. And I think it's the same when people are, whenever we're doing something that isn't our strength, it can be more draining for us. And then the last thing is there's no certainty that any of this work will pay off. You can put 20, 30, 40, 120 hours into a grant proposal and it won't get funded. So you're investing a lot of time and energy into something, and there's no way or no guarantee that it's going to pay off. In many ways in life, that's not true with some things. We put money into something or time into something, and we know it's going to pay off in the long run. And with grant writing, there is no certainty, and that makes it more stressful. So one of the things that I joke about is really the only thing that would be worse if funders asked of you to declare your weight in your application and send a photograph of you in a bikini. And I actually don't have a photograph of me in a bikini. I did look for this presentation to see if I could find one, but I could not. But this is the most embarrassing photograph I have. This was actually taken during the Camino, and I was going sightseeing, but I didn't have any sightseeing clothes in which to travel. So, and just to make it even worse, the hat that I'm wearing, it's actually flowery and red. So it was the most uncoordinated outfit you could possibly have. So that's my take on why it's so stressful. But it doesn't have to be. And I really believe that we can do this in a way that leaves us empowered and nourished. So I think when we undertake grant writing from old fear-based paradigms, such as separation, competition, and scarcity, that pervade our society, it constricts and depletes us. But I do believe that we can undertake grant writing when we're rooted in love and generosity and sufficiency and collaboration and wholeness. And when we can stand in that place, we can root ourselves in those. We can do grant writing in a way where the proposals are more beautiful and that we're left nourished by the process. So you've got more beautiful proposals, more successful proposals, and we're not left drained and depleted, but we're actually nourished by the process. And and I definitely believe it's possible. It takes some focus. It's not the default. The default is the opposite of that. But I do believe it's possible, and I've been playing with it myself for many years. So what I want to go into is what I think grant writing is really about. And this is a little bit of a different view than many people have. So on the surface, it looks like grant writing is you ask a funder for money, and the funder gauges your proposal and gives you some money or not. And I really think it's rooted in something deeper. So I want to tell you a bit of a story. I went to Costa Rica a few years ago with my son, and I was incredibly fortunate that we walked in a rainforest, and we had a guide take us through there. And he was a young man who had grown up right in the rainforest and knew so much. So it was so interesting to walk with him. And he did take us over crocodile-infested waters. So that was another reason I was really glad that we went with him and not alone. And when we were in the rainforest, he showed us this enormous tree. I mean, it must have been at least 100 feet tall, if not more, and had this huge girth. And it was just a magnificent tree. And, you know, and it was rainforest, so it was hung with, you know, all of these lichen and mosses and you know, there was all the bird song and the sounds of the forest. And he explained to us that there was a lichen that was up in the trees that this beetle would go and eat or use, and then it would come down the tree trunk, and it would leave its dung at the bottom of the base of the tree. And he showed us this little mound, and he said that there were nutrients in that in the dung of this beetle that was vital to this tree. And without that beetle living there, that tree would collapse. It would die and collapse. It would fall. And so he was showing us the complete interdependence of the system. And when he was sharing it, I was just thinking about grant writing, being a grant writer, and realizing that, you know, somebody could look at grant writing and see the foundations and the funders as the big trees. You know, the big trees of the forest, they're the ones that have the money. But really, they are as dependent upon us for their success, for them thriving as we are on them, that if we don't give them projects that are worthy of funding, if we don't do a good job, they can't succeed in their mission. You know, they cannot change education. They cannot change child health care. They cannot change the things that they want to change without us collaborating and working well with them. Just as that enormous tree is dependent upon the beetle for its existence, so you know, really large funders are dependent upon us for our collaboration, for us understanding what's going on in the world and in the base. And so within that context, there's another thing that I want to bring in, which is that I believe that all proposals have their own energy and want to be born into the world. And I have seen this over and over again over the years, that before I write a proposal, I will sit down and I will meditate and I will feel what the proposal is and what it's essentially about. And years ago, I was working with an organization, and they had pulled together this large meeting of all of the bigwigs for a pretty sizable town, including the CEO of this large organization. And I was working on a proposal for them, and I think it was to create an emergency room in a hospital. And I sat down before I went into this meeting, and what I heard or saw really clearly was that this emergency room was going to create a sanctuary in the community that didn't currently exist. And so I went into the meeting, and I just happened to sit next to the CEO. And she began the meeting, and she said, you know, this project, it's about the new emergency room, the new wing, but it's really about creating a sanctuary for the people of this town that doesn't currently exist. I mean, it's exactly the same words. And to me, it was just, it was startling to me. I was like, wow, this project has its own its own essence. This is what it's really about, and we can feel that. You know, we intuitively know it. And so when I'm thinking about grant writing, it really is a transaction of the divine. And so there is something that wants to be born into the world, and we can see it as grant writers, as people who work in nonprofits, of what wants to come through. We can sense it. We can see what needs to be done on the ground. At the same time, a funder has a dream in their heart for a world that is more just and more beautiful, and it's pulling on them to do something using their life force to have that become reality. And so what happens when we write a grant proposal, we are writing that which is most beautiful in our hearts that wants to be born into the world. And when it goes to the right funder, and the right funder reads it and understands it and says yes to it, then money is transferred from one bank account to another. But it really is a divine transaction that allows the creation of something that really wants to be existing in the world. And so that is how I think about grant writing. And in when we look at it in that way, we are vehicles for that. You know, we're midwives for new life coming in. It's not new babies coming in, but it's new programs, new projects, new possibilities in the world. So what I'm going to go into is talking about 11 guiding questions for conscious grant writing. And before I dive into those, I want to just say that grant writing is like building a house. You know, you can build something really beautiful, full of soul, but if it doesn't have good plumbing and electricity, it's no good. And you could also build a house that has, you know, a roof and a cellar and all the things it needs, but if it lacks beauty and soul, it, you know, is not as beautiful to live in. And so what I'm not going to be talking about in this conversation is the basic structures of grant writing, you know, how to do this, how to do that, what to put in an introduction, what to put in a need statement, those kind of things. But I want to share with you a resource that I think could be very helpful if you're looking for more of that kind of information. I wrote a book a few years ago called Grant Writing Revealed, in which I interviewed 25 top grant writers who had collectively raised over $500 million. And I interviewed them, like, why are they so good? You know, what makes a difference between these people and people who don't succeed quite the same way? And I broke it down to 24 elements that are essential elements to grant writing. And one of the things I realized is that people who are masterful at the work didn't skip any of the elements. So some of the things that you're not comfortable doing, they would still do anyway. So for me, example, writing budgets, I don't particularly enjoy it, but I thrive on it, but I know it needs to be done. The other thing that I find uncomfortable is contacting funders. It's not how I'm a little bit, I guess, shy somehow, and I don't enjoy that particularly, but I do it, and I found a way to enjoy it. And I think that makes the difference, because what many people do is skip the step they're uncomfortable with, and then like links in a chain, there's something missing and it doesn't have strong integrity. So the book is available on a gift basis, and the link is here on this slide, and you're welcome to go get that. It's available free on a gift basis, recognizing that we are all gifts in the world and wanting to promote gift economy. And you can also get a hard copy on Amazon, and there is a charge for that because, you know, Amazon has fees. The other thing is I have a quiz that I put together based on the book and based on the elements, so you can assess for yourself which areas you might be strong in and which ones you might want to strengthen going forward. And you're welcome to log into this place and take that quiz. It may take a couple of days for the results to come back, because I have to manually click something in the background every day to make it happen. And but you're welcome to do that. So what we're going to do now is jump in to the 11 elements. And the first one is, how can I put more love fully into my grant writing? And what I believe is love, beauty, and grace are the intangible threads that make our world glisten, and they're present in every work of art, every act of kindness, or courageous stand for justice. And when we develop grant proposals within the context of love and beauty, they're embedded with that grace that speaks to the heart of natural allies who read it and resonate with what is resonating in your heart. And I think one of the best ways I can talk about this is a couple of ways. One is the beauty and the love that we put into the grant writing process, but also how we treat ourselves when we're doing it. You know that truly we can't make anything beautiful and loving when we're beating ourselves up in the background to get it done. And I certainly know that that's my tendency. So I'd like to give you an example of this. Years ago, I was working for a client, and I was approaching burnout. I'd just been working on too many big grants too many times in a row. And I really loved this client, so I wanted to do the project for her, and I did. And she read the draft the first draft that I'd sent to her, and she said to me, and she was an excellent grant writer herself, and she said to me, you know, this is technically excellent, you know, it's very good work as usual. There's just something really missing. And she said, I can't put my finger on it, but there's something missing. And I knew exactly what it was. And when I'm writing proposals, I'm a long-term meditator. I meditate every day for an hour and have done for a decade. And when I'm working on something, I will sink into that meditative space and ask, you know, what's this about? How can I make it more beautiful? What wants to come in? So I will take the project and then I'll weave that into it. So it might be an image. It might be a story. There might be something that I will weave into it. And in this instance, I hadn't done that. And she felt it. She could see it. She couldn't quite put her finger on what was missing. But what was missing was love, was me going into that space of loving into connection and letting what wanted to flow through into the writing come through. And so I encourage you, and then the other piece of this, though, is to, when you're asking this question, how can I put love more fully into my grant writing, one, to look at how can you treat yourself more lovingly as you are grant writing. So what, you know, the places that you can go to feel replenished. Is there something that you love to do? My neighbor loves to garden, and her garden is so beautiful. And for me, I love to be in nature. I'm very, very fortunate to live in a beautiful part of the country with massive waterfalls and lakes, and that's my place to go. And so I'd really like you to ask the question of, what is your favorite way to replenish yourself and to get present to love? And then when you can do that for yourself, it will naturally flow into your writing more effortlessly. So the next one, I'm going to read this quote. This is actually a picture from the Camino, and this is a quote by L. Arnott, and it says, it's a poem actually. Do not be dismayed by the brokenness of the world. All things break, and all things can be mended. Not with time, as they say, but with intention. So go, love intentionally, extravagantly, and unconditionally. The broken world waits in darkness for the light that is you. And it's actually, we're recording this on winter solstice. So that's a beautiful quote for today. So the next element is, next question is, how can I use my time wisely in service to the greater good? And there's two aspects of this. One is knowing what not to bother with, is as powerful as knowing what to do. And the second is managing yourself kindly so that you're productive. So I really think this is one of the reasons that, one of the core reasons that I'm successful as a grant writer is knowing when not to bother with something. Which projects are not going to work well, where there is a team that is not collaborating well, and it's like, yep, this project isn't going anywhere because you people can't work together even to get the proposal done. And also in the grant writing process, like where it's worth sinking my time into something, and where that I can be really efficient about getting some piece done. And so I think it's really powerful for you to learn that for yourself, and from other people, like what is worth investing my time. And there is an 80-20 rule that works. You may have heard this for fundraising, where 20% of your donors will give 80% of your funding, and also that so there isn't it's not proportional, and it works with time management too. So 20% of your time will produce 80% of your productivity. And I think what we're tempted to do, especially when we're new to grant writing, is to look at all of the possibilities for funding equally and spend an equal amount of time in it. And what is really sensible to do is to look at that and go, okay, where are my best prospects? Which is my 10 or 20% that is likely to pay off? Let me put 80 or 90% of my time into those, rather than into spreading my time out over everything. I have been consulting for a very long time, and I know that I have the luxury of doing that. And I know that people on staff don't always have that luxury. That you may be reporting to a CEO or a board that want you to apply for something that is not a good prospect. And I understand that difficulty. And my best suggestion around that is to do your best to educate the people that you're working with, and let them. And sometimes you have to do something and it flops, and that might be a good chance for you to go back and say, that's good, but it left me with less time for putting into this project. And so I think education is the most useful thing we can do there. And then the other piece is managing yourself kindly so that you're productive. So I grew up in a pretty strict private school in the UK, and I learned to work hard and kind of beat myself up to do that. and I have a type A streak in me. And so that's how for a long time I made myself productive, was working long hours, working faster and harder than other people. And it has been an exercise for me in the last few years in nurturing myself into productivity, into really listening to what I need, encouraging myself, giving rewards for doing things, and learning how to manage myself in a way that is kind and also productive. And so I think this is also a question for us to ask ourselves how we can do that competently. And so a guiding question here for your inaction is, what's one thing that isn't a good use of your time that you could drop doing now? And so I want you to look at how you're spending your time, and what's one thing that you could just drop, or alternatively, what's one thing that you could do for 5 minutes a day that would make a difference? And I actually want to mention that I'll be providing these questions in a more contemplative way for you later on, and I'll explain that later. So the third question is, in what ways can I generate a context of sufficiency for myself, my organization, and my community? And I think this is a lot of what's coming here is based on the work of Lynn Twist, and she wrote this beautiful book called The Soul of Money. If you have not read it, I highly recommend it. It's not a long read, but it's excellent and has a completely fresh way of looking at money. And the default in our culture is that there isn't enough money, and that there isn't enough of a lot of things. And it's a place of fear and contraction and a sense of scarcity. And that's pretty much pervasive. One of the things Lynn said recently is, if do you have money issues? And she said, well, if your answer is yes, that means you're a human being in the 21st century. We all do, even people who are born into extreme wealth. You know, it's just, it's difficult not to be. So she says that there are 3 myths that we she calls them toxic myths, that there's not enough, that of anything. There's not enough time, there's not enough money, we're probably not beautiful enough or thin enough or smart enough or any of those things. That more is better, that if we had more of those things, it would be better. We just believe that that is to be true. And the third is, that is just the way it is. That is just the way it is. And so she encourages people to think about those. Are they really true? And are they true for you? And she defines a context of sufficiency this way: that sufficiency is a context that we bring forth from within, that reminds us if we look around and within ourselves, we'll find what we need. There is always enough. And I'm going to read that for you again. Sufficiency is a context that we bring forth from within, that reminds us that if we look around and within ourselves, we will find what we need. There is always enough. So what she's saying here is, it's not necessarily that you are thirsty and you are in a context where there is water, but if you're thirsty, even if there isn't that external circumstance of water, that you can look inside yourself and like, okay, but I know where to find water. I know I need to walk down this path, or I know that I could drill in this place and I would find water, or I have resources within myself to capture water from the rain. So, or I have a friend who has water who will give it to me. So it's not that the resources, there is sufficient in the present moment. And the other piece of this is, it's in the present moment. So I think we get caught up in, okay, I need, $100,000 to do this project. And actually what you need right now is some time to write this project up, to ask for $100,000. Or right now, you actually could do with $20,000 to get it up and running for the beginning of the summer. Whereas we tend to always look at what we need over the long term, but we fail to pay enough attention to what do we need right now? Like what right now, what would be sufficient? What would be sufficient for me and others right now? And so the question that I'd love for you to ponder is to name 3 ways in which you or your community are resource rich right now in this moment. And this may be inequalities such as determination, clarity, or passion. And it can also be external aspects as well. So the next question is, how can I be more present to gratitude on a daily basis? And there is research showing now, there's a wonderful place in California at the University of California in Berkeley called the Greater Good Science Center, I think. And they have been doing lots of research on positive psychology. And it's a wonderful resource, actually, if you're looking for research along those lines. And one of the things they talk about is gratefulness and the positive impact that gratefulness has. And they've shown that people who, for example, before they go to sleep at night, write down 3 things that they're grateful from that day, or tell another person 3 things that they're grateful about from that day, or maybe even say it in your head to yourself, it actually has shown to have positive impacts on the people psychologically, and they're healthier and happier, and just from that one practice. And so I want to encourage to be grateful for what we do have and who we are and the communities that we're in. And there's a wonderful resource called gratefulness.org. And funnily enough, it also happens to be based in my hometown of Ithaca, New York. And they have fantastic resources there on practicing gratefulness. And they have beautiful poetry, and you can light candles. It's quite a lovely space, and a beautiful community there of people. And so one question to deepen in for yourself is, what simple gratitude practice could I put in place for myself starting now? Okay, so the next question is, how can I give myself more spaciousness during the grant writing process? And, you know, grant writing is this really linear thing, right? It goes from A to B, like 1, 2, 3, 4, you fill in this box and this and this, and it's a logical process where one thing leads to another that leads to another. And, but I really think it's important that we leave spaciousness for something to arise while we're working on a project. And I've definitely learned this for myself, that even when I'm working on a really big project and I'm slammed with a deadline, I will take an hour to meditate, because when I've stopped meditating, I am probably 3 times more productive than when I went in. And also just ideas come, you know, I'll take the dog for a walk, and, you know, I'll just see 2 birds in a branch, and I'll think to myself, that's an image I could use. And so definitely take time for yourself, and to just allow things to bubble up. And I'll give an example of this. Actually, I was working with a school district, and I'm pretty close to Amish country where I live, and I had to drive through to meet with them. And I was working on this really big, boring grant. It was like this 200-page, I don't know if you've worked on this, a reading first grant, which was very, I had a lot of boilerplate stuff in it, and it was tedious actually to work on. And so I was trying to decide for myself how I could make it more fun. And I just stopped at an Amish place where they had these beautiful quilts. And I looked at the quilts, and I thought, gosh, those are so beautiful. And I was thinking to myself, it's kind of like literacy, you know, that when you give literacy to a child, it's like this warm handmade quilt that they can wrap around them for their whole life. And so what I did was I took images of different quilts, and I started each section with a quilt image, and then tied that analogy in. And so that was, and it made the process more fun for me. It certainly made the grant more beautiful and more interesting. It also spoke of the place where it came from, because we were in Amish country. And that it was from taking some time, you know, for me goofing off and going and having a look at quilts when I was, you know, driving to the meeting. So there's lots of times when that has happened, and I encourage you to do that. And so a question for you to contemplate is, what do you love to do, or where do you love to be, that opens up creative ideas for you? And, you know, for me, it's most certainly nature. And I also want to mention a couple of things about time that I forgot in the time slide that kind of fit here. There are 2 things that I've learned about timekeeping that are kind of helpful tips. One is that we universally underestimate how long something will take by a factor of 3, unless it's something that we've done over and over and over again. When we're doing something new or new-ish, we will underestimate it by 3. And there's research to show this, that it's pretty universal. It's not, you know, some people by 4 or 5 and some people by 2. Most of us underestimate by 3. So if you're going into something new, you think, oh, it'll take me an hour. Actually, it'll probably take you 3. And you can save yourself some headaches by recognizing that. And the other is that to work in 90-minute chunks, there's research that shows this too, that when we, if there's something especially that we're avoiding or we're really looking forward to doing, if you put on a timer and say, okay, I'm just going to work on this for 90 minutes, and then give yourself a break, and then do another 90 minutes, and then give yourself a break. In 4 sessions of 90 minutes, you'll actually be incredibly productive. And I have practiced this and tried it, and it works. So I encourage you to try that. So for that question is, what do you love to do? You know, pottery or gardening, and where do you love to be? You know, for me, it's by the lakes and the waterfalls. That opens up creative ideas. Oh, you have to excuse me. That is my dog barking. All right, always seems to happen on a webinar. Okay, so number 6 is what is my dream for the world that I want to bring to reality through grant development? And Charles Eisenstein, he wrote a wonderful book called Sacred Economics, which I also highly recommend. It's one of the best books I've read in a long time. And he talks about creating the world, creating the more beautiful world that our heart knows is possible. And what he talks about is deep within all of us. There is something that yearns to be born, a world that we want to create, one that is more just, more loving, more sustainable, and more beautiful. And each of us feel that. And so it's important for us to spend some time dreaming and envisioning the world the way that we want to see it, because it's taking that vision from the dream world, from where we muse about it, or from where it exists outside of external reality, and using our work, bringing that dream into reality. And for some of you, that may be very obvious, that you have this dream for the world, you can articulate it very carefully. And for others, it may just take some time of allowing it to bubble to the surface. And this goes back to the last slide of taking some time for creativity and for your dreams to emerge. And so a question here is, what do you love to, that is, okay, my questions got mixed up. I don't know why it's done that. But yeah, so the action here is, what is your dream for the world? Share it with another person. What is it that you want to bring into the world? And see if you can find language for it. And it may be totally down to you. You may have been doing this for years. But for those of you where it's not, try sharing it with a friend and seeing if you can articulate this beautiful thing that is inside that you sense and feel, and put it into language. I'm just going to read this poem by David Wagoner, and this is called Stand Still. The trees ahead and the bushes beside you are not lost. Wherever you are is called here, and you must treat it as a powerful stranger, must ask permission to know it and be known. The forest breathes. Listen, it answers. I have made this place around you. If you leave it, you may come back again, saying, here. No two trees are the same to raven, and no two branches are the same to wren. What if a tree or a bush is lost on you? You are surely lost. Stand still. The forest knows where you are, and you must let it find you. And I love that poem. It reminds us that here is always here, and all we have to do is turn our attention back to find it. So we've talked a lot about sort of dreaming and allowing and creativity, but none of this really matters if we don't put it into action. And so the next question is, what bold actions can I take now that are in alignment with my vision? And grant writing is a supremely actionable thing. It's picking up the phone and talking to someone. It's pulling together a collaborative team. And so I love this quote that's here by Arnold Glasgow. Ideas not coupled with action never become bigger than the brain cells they occupy. So without action, everything is just a dream. So it's taking that which is sacred and beautiful that sits within you and that you sense, and bringing it out into the world through your action, through your writing, through your collaboration, through submitting your grant applications. And so a question here is, what is one small action that you could take today that aligns with the more beautiful world that your heart knows is possible? And you may have lots of actions, but what is one that you could do today? So number 8 is, how can I communicate truthfully with my peers and funders, even when it feels scary to do so? And I think this is a really key question, and I think truthful communication is absolutely fundamental to grant writing, and I see people veering away from it, and I think it can be challenging for us. So there's been many times I've been sitting in a boardroom, and we're talking about a project, and I can just hear or see the elephant in the room that nobody is talking about. And luckily, because I'm a grant consultant, I always figure, well, they pay me money to tell them these things, so I will do that. And but it takes some courage, to do that. Like, what is it that really needs to be said, or I can see that needs to be said? I think this is also true when working in collaboration with your team, your project partners. And for me, this is often bringing it back to the higher good. People start getting territorial, and they want to do some peace, and they don't want to work with someone, and it kind of begins to get a little petty. Although I don't like to use that word. I guess we all can be petty, right? But my job is to remind them that this isn't about this program or this agency. This is about making sure that kids have food over the summer. This is about making sure that kids are safe when they go home, or whatever project it is that we're working on. And actually, I had a very strong example of this. I was working on a project right after the election, and the two collaborators were I had one sort of diehard liberal, and I had one person who was a Republican, and they were working on the same project, and you could just kind of a different way of approaching it. They each had their own teams, and they were working on a similar thing. And you could feel kind of it felt almost to me like red meat versus granola. and at one point I just had to call it and say, what, I can tell that you have different values, but you both value the kids that you're working for, and I know that you both really care about this because I see the time and effort you put into. And so this is a really great opportunity for you to learn to work powerfully across differences for the greater good of the kids that you serve. And they heard it. They're like, yeah, that's true. Like, this is exactly what we're here to work on. And we put the proposal together and I think it was very powerful. Don't know if it got funded yet, but I have good feelings about it. So the question here is, in what way could I communicate more clearly with someone about grant writing? Where do you tend to stay silent, where you could have more courage to speak up in the future? And where are you not telling the truth to yourself, your organization, or your funders? And again, I'm going to get something to you so you can think into these questions more fully. But I think there is truthful communication, especially with funders. If something's not going well, instead of trying to pull the wool over their eyes, I call up and say, hey, this is not working the way that we had thought. I wanted to let you know we're on the same team. And I know this project is important to you. It is to me. And I just wanted to be in communication. It is very powerful, especially when things aren't going well, rather than finding out at the last minute. So I think we can collaborate with funders way more than we do. So the next question is, how can I bring full-hearted courageousness to my work? And I'm sorry, I'm just stumbling here for a moment because I'm just seeing this quoted on the same slide again. So what is this here is a full-hearted courageousness. This is about being courageous with a full heart, which is not the same as a lot of what we're taught, which is, you can feel the fear and do it anyway. So for example, if you need to have an uncomfortable conversation with a collaborator, or you need to have an uncomfortable conversation with a funder, we can avoid that. And some of the advice is, well, feel the fear and do it anyway. I actually don't believe in that. I actually think it's better for us to sink into our hearts, ask us what we need, and what quality do we want to infuse into our body so that we can make that call from a powerful and empowered place. So we're not pushing against the world, but we're pulling in what we need so that we can act with grace and beauty. And so I really encourage you to look at something that you're procrastinating or avoiding, and then look at what it is that you need in order for you to be able to embrace yourself and others to act. And I think that when we get present to our lives as precious and freely given as a gift, we can embrace our imperfections and connect with our own deep purpose. Then we can take courageous action. So when we really connect with why we're spending our life working on this project, it'll help us to make those difficult calls. And so a question here is, well, what have you been putting off because it's uncomfortable? Envision your dreams of the world being realized and see how taking an action will help you that you've been avoiding will have long-term benefit for the world. Ask within what you need in order to take this action with a full heart. And so really sink down into what it is that you love, why you're doing this, and then be courageous with that. So, the heart of the word courage is kura, which is heart. And so, all right, and there's a beautiful poem that I want to read to you called Caretake This Moment. It says, immerse yourself in its particulars, respond to this person, this challenge, this deed, quit the evasion, stop giving yourself needless trouble. It's time to really live, to fully inhabit the situation you happen to be in now. You are not some disinterested bystander. Exert yourself. Respect your partnership with Providence. Ask yourself often, how may I perform this particular deed such that it would be consistent with and acceptable to the divine will? Heed the answer and get to work. When the doors are shut and your room is dark, you are not alone. The will of nature is within you as your natural genius is within. Listen to its importunings, follow its directives. As concerns the art of living, the material is your own life. No great thing is created suddenly. There must be time. Give your best and always be kind. It really kind of sums up everything I've been talking about. So, beautiful. All right, so we've got two last ones and then we'll wrap up. So next is who can I collaborate with to make grant writing more effective? Any great grant is never written in isolation. You can, and I have worked on projects where people have pretty much singularly written a grant proposal, and it is a mess when it gets funded because you cannot usually implement a grant alone. And if you haven't brought people into the planning process, it's usually a mess in the implementation. So I definitely encourage you to do this as a team sport. And I want to share with you this picture actually. This is me on the right-hand side, and this fall I took a class in outdoor living, and I actually was in Washington, D.C., and my flight got delayed, and I couldn't actually get to my class until like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and that day we happened to be building shelters in the outside and then sleeping out. And so I turned up, and these good people in my group had built the shelter, and I got to sleep in it. And then I did my part when I got there. So there's a great beauty in collaborating and working effectively, and allowing other people to contribute their strength and grace to projects. And then the last question is, how can I be in service to that which wants to be born and allow my projects to flow and for the miraculous to be present? And it's really what we've been talking about from the beginning. And a question here is, what allows you to sink down into the depths of your being and allow the miraculous to emerge for you? For me, this is meditation. I started out meditating just for 10 minutes a day, and I found it so recuperative. I increased the time, and I have pretty much I've done it for most days for many years, and it makes a very big difference to me. And it's a little, for me right now, it's a little bit like exercise, you know. I'm also a swimmer. That's another place that I go to relax and deepen within myself. And If I don't exercise or go swim for too many days in a row, I know it. And it's the same if I don't meditate, I can feel it. I get slightly crankier. And so I want to read this quote by John Mohawk. He says, "An individual is not smart, according to our culture. An individual is merely lucky to be part of a system that has intelligence that happens to reside in them. In other words, be humble about this always. The real intelligence isn't the property of an individual corporation. The real intelligence is the property of the universe itself." And that's exactly what we're talking about. How can we be vehicles for that intelligence flowing through us and through our work? And so I want to just take a couple of minutes to say that I am starting a new 8-week grant writing course that uses a lot of these concepts. It's online and accessible to everyone. And you can learn the art of writing effective grants while living a good life at the same time. You write a full and effective grant proposal draft in that time, and you'll get feedback from your peers. And my goal is that you'll become more effective at grant writing and have a really fulfilled life. And the link for the website for that is right there. If you have the old handouts, it is an incorrect link. So this is the correct one, grantwriterswell.com. I think initially I put thegrantwriterswell.com, which was my mistake. And there is a quote here from a lovely gentleman, Stephen Carlson, who recently was in the beta version of this course. And I won't read that all out, but I'll let you look at that at your leisure. I'm also giving an early bird bonus, which is a 45-minute one-on-one session with me. And for people who are listening to this, there is a coupon for $50 off that expires at midnight on December 31st. And you're welcome to use that, and I hope you will. And I want to say that I am going to be creating little daily guided questions around each one of these elements for you to contemplate as we transition into the new year. So there happen to be 11 days between December 21st and January 1st. And I'm going to record a short meditation place to delve into these questions each day for the next 11 days. And if you sign up for my evening here, I'll see that you get a copy of the recordings as they come out. And so I'm really looking forward to doing that. I actually just came as middle of the night to me as this is something to give to you all. So I'm excited to do that. And
that is a great idea. Thank you for offering that, Jana, to our viewers.
Yeah. So I was going to say I woke up at 2 a.m. this morning. So I'm like, okay.
Great ideas in the middle of the night, yes.
Right. So I'm going to read this last quote. And actually, maybe I won't do that. I will. Yes, maybe I will. So starting here, what do you want to remember? How sunlight creeps along the shining floor. What scent of old wood hovers. What softened sound from the outside fills the air. Will you ever bring a better gift for the world than breathing respect that you carry wherever you go right now? Are you waiting for time to show you some better thoughts? When you turn around, starting here, lift this new glimpse that you found. Carry into evening all that you want from this day. This interval you spent reading or hearing this, keep it for life. What can anyone give you greater than now? Starting here, right in this room, and you turn around. So I'm hoping that that is my gift for you. And also I'm going to be doing some Facebook Live sessions tomorrow, Friday 22nd at 12 noon Eastern, the following Friday the 29th, and Tuesday January 2nd at 4:45. And I have to admit, I've actually not done a Facebook Live Q&A, so I'm hoping it works out. And, so,
I'm sure you'll be fine.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll figure it out. So if you have questions, if you go to this page, you can put in your questions and I can answer them. And then the last thing is I'm going to play this. I don't know if it'll. Oh yeah, we'll see. So this actually is a little video that my daughter and I created when we finished the Camino. This was actually when we got to the ocean. We went actually summer solstice this year, so exactly half a year ago. And we spent summer solstice on the beach. And this is this. You may not hear any of the sound from this, but we were both singing "These Feet Were Made for Walking," and I'm just going to play this and see if it comes through. So. Okay, it is definitely better with sound, but so those were some happy feet for having accomplished a mighty task. And but I think it's a really great example of setting ourselves a big goal and walking. I always set a task for myself of walking it beautifully, and that meant not only thinking in the beauty of the Camino, but treating myself beautifully, and to let go of pushing myself to achieve my goal, that I would only really achieve reaching Santiago if I treated myself beautifully along the way. And so I want to leave you with the thought that you're vessels for something sacred and beautiful being birthed in the world. And when you work from that place, it connects you with a deep power and depth and grace that shines through in your writing and shines through in your life. And so I really appreciate this time, and thank you, Tammy, for putting this all together, and yeah, just thank you for everything. So.
Oh yes, this has been a beautiful session. We thank you again for all that you offer in your offerings and the time that you took to give us this session. We re-recorded the session, so you've done it twice. We really appreciate the time that you have given to the nonprofit and grant writing organizations that will benefit from your words. So thank you so much for these tips and advice, and we want to thank everyone for attending or watching this recording, and we hope that you enjoyed the topic and that you all have amazing success in your fundraising efforts as well as in life. Thank you again, and take care.